All right. Hello and good morning. Thank you for taking time to meet with us today. From the department, as presenters, we have Caitlin Devlin, waiting list lead with the A11 Administration Division, and myself, Justin Merrill, A11 Compliance Monitor with the Compliance Division. As panelists, we have Bill Craner, A11 Program Director, Catherine Cole, A11 Program Administrator, and Amy Hammond, Manager of Compliance Monitoring. As the facilitator, we have Kara Poli, Senior Compliance Monitor with the Compliance Division. Thank you, Kara, for having my back today. Today, we are here to offer training for the Section 811 Project Rental Assistance, or 811 program. Specifically, we're focusing on maintaining compliance with vacancies and waitlist for the 811 program. We anticipate about a total of 2 hours for the training and questions. That's not a hard 2 hours, that's some flexibility in there. By offering this training, it is our intention to foster a deeper understanding of the program, to ensure future access to those attending, to those who were not able to attend, and to those who will be new to the program in the future. Today's training will be recorded. The recording and handout will be posted as soon as possible to the Compliance Division's presentation section of the department's website and to our YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe, I guess. During the presentation, please ask your questions in the question and answer box. Department staff will be filtering those questions and bringing forward relevant ones to the conversation. Questions or comments that will be covered later in the presentation will be held until that time. If you have questions specific to the past notices to the department or open monitoring reviews, please contact outside this training the appropriate department staff. Please feel free to ask questions and provide feedback. As always, the department welcomes your participation. However, we reserve the right to terminate any participants who are being obscene, offensive, or aggressive to department staff or other participants. This is not an expectation, but in today's world of forwarded and open meetings, we are providing a warning. All right, are we ready? Caitlin, are you all set and ready to go?
I think so, let's go.
All right, so there we go. This is our contact information. This is our physical address and our mailing address. If you choose to visit our office, that's where we're located. We're right across from the Capitol. Our mailing address is if you want to send us something by mail. I think that's pretty easy to understand. Our website, the website address has changed. If you do try going to the old one, it should usually redirect you to the new one. But we got this much shorter, fancier web domain. So that helps us out with our email addresses as well. As you can see, the 811 info email has been shortened, and so has my email address. If you have questions outside of the presentation you didn't feel comfortable asking or you didn't think about until after the presentation, please feel free to email us at that address. So let's talk about part one, how to determine the required number of 811 PRA units. So you are going to need to look at the following documents: the owner participation agreement, the rental assistance contract, pause letters from 2020, unit mix update and rent schedules, and release email. The first document is the owner participation agreement. This is what it looks like here on the right-hand side. It is commonly called the participation agreement or the PA. So, if you're talking to Caitlin or myself, you may hear us say participation agreement or PA. We try not to use acronyms too much unless you're really savvy with the program. So today I'm going to try to not use the abbreviations of things. The participation agreement outlines the requirements of the 811 PRA program, and the most recent version determines how many total number of units you're going to have. So this form is kind of like how many units can the department have at your property, and that's what this document is going to talk about. It talks about the maximum number, but the department does have the right to reduce the number that we have at your property based on need and funding. We also have the authority to decide the unit mix, so basically how many efficiencies and 1 and 2 bedroom units. And we also have the right to request that you disperse the units throughout your entire property. So you can't have them all in the same building or in the same part of your property. The program itself caps the total number of A11 PRA units to 25% of all units. So whatever your total number of units are at the property, only up to 25% can be used for the program. However, we typically do not ask for that in the participation agreement unless it's a super small property. The units need for the program must not be for units that you are designating at the 30% AMI for the housing tax credit program. So you are having 811 tenants in units that are being designated for the housing tax credit program. And when you're filling them, whatever unit you designate for the tax credit program, it can't be the 30%. You can do 50, you can do 60, but you cannot designate the unit at 30% AMI. Let's see. Someone is saying that the captions are hard to read. All right, let's see if we can maybe make this a little bigger. Thanks for that feedback. That help?
Justin, they can also hide the webcams because that takes up some space on the screen. So if they want to go to the webcam section of the go-to platform, they can hide your webcam. And that might free up some space.
Okay, thanks, Kara. I appreciate that. All right, so let's continue on. The next document you're going to need to look at is the rental assistance contract. We commonly call it the RAC. It is an estimate of how many units we think that you're going to need at your community. So it's kind of the conversation starting point. The RAC can be adjusted. So after getting some units at the property, if the number that we put into the RAC doesn't make sense, we may adjust that number. It could be less or it can be more depending on need. And this starts the conversation about how many units are going to be like the total number of units and the unit mix. This is a good place to identify the current, or a good place to identify is the current rent schedule or a unit mix. So this is kind of the document that gets the conversation going of how many units, but that can be amended in later updates through a unit mix or a rent schedule. Pause letters are letters that are from the department that were sent in 2020. So when the program was getting started, we were starting to place tenants at different properties that had signed participation agreements. And when we started placing those tenants, we were starting to see need in areas and locations and types of apartments and units. And so what we were finding is sometimes we did not need as many units at those properties. And that also had to do with funding. But we sent letters, and if you have a letter that was sent for your property, they were uploaded into the attachment system for CMTS. And so if you had one, you would need to look for a pause letter there. So what is the pause letter? Basically, if it was sent, it was pausing the number of tenants that you were required to have based on the tenants that were already there. So for example, if you were required per the RAC to have 10 units and you didn't have any tenants, you were paused at 0. If you were required to have 10 units per the RAC, but you had 3 tenants at the time when we sent the letter, you were paused at 3. And so going forward, you were required to have based on that. Although the letter paused the number of units, the development is still obligated to participate in the program and provide notice of availability of units. And the important thing to note is that as the program has progressed, a lot of these letters are becoming less relevant because the 811 admin team will be reaching out and saying, hey, we are actually we're removing that pause and we need you to fulfill the full amount of how many were on the RAC. So if you have one of those, you would then see, you may receive an email, which then would be uploaded into the attachment system saying, hey, we're unpausing that. It looks like we have a question. I'm going to look at that. Does TDHCA maintain the RAC, or is it the owner's responsibility to maintain? In other words, who do I request it from? That's a great question. So The rack is generated by the department, specifically the 811 Administration Division. And when the participation agreement is, the participation agreement gets executed when the owner is applying for funding from the department. And that participation agreement is a commitment to provide units for the program. And then the owner would start notifying the department of the availability of units. We would send a couple of units, and then from there, we would execute a rental assistance contract, or RAC. That RAC would be sent to the owner to execute, and then the executed copy would be uploaded into the attachment system into TDHCA. That's a great question. The next form that you're going to look for are the unit mix updates. So a unit mix update is basically an amendment to the RAC, specifically dealing with unit breakdown, rents, and gross rents are listed there. The form looks identical to a rent schedule, which is an update to the utilities and gross rents. But the difference is in the top right-hand corner under dates, it will say unit mix change only if it's a unit mix change only. So it is usually a change in the unit mix, so the number of units per bedroom. So it could be that you have a certain number of bedrooms, but we needed to make a change based on need. It could also impact the total number of units. So instead of having just 10, we could say now that you're required to have 15. The unit mix update is an amendment to the original RAC. And so it is then, if there is a unit mix update, the information on there is what is needed in terms of how many tenants you're supposed to have and how many per bedroom size. And so you would need to make sure that you look for the unit mix change if there is one. If you are uncertain if there was a unit mix, you can also double check and look at the current rent schedule, because that will also reflect any previous unit mix change that happened before it. If there is a need to adjust the unit mix, the 811 administration team wants you to understand that you need to request that change in advance. So if for any reason you choose to rent a unit that is not a bedroom size that is not available, you cannot be paid for that unit until there is an amendment to the RAC. So you need to do that in advance, because you won't get payment on something unless that is outlined. That is a HUD requirement. So an example, if you have a unit mix that requires 8 one-bedroom units and 2 two-bedroom units, and you lease a 3-bedroom unit, you won't get paid on that 3-bedroom unit. The RAC needed to be amended so that you could get paid for that. The next type of document you need to check are the release emails. Release emails are emails that are sent from the 811 Administration Division directly to their contact for the property. It is in response to you notifying the department that you had available units for the 811 PRA program. But instead of sending a referral, the email is notifying the owner that this specific unit is not needed. Those emails are attached into CMTS. So if you need to see what is the history of that, they are being recorded and attached into CMTS. So after they send the email, they upload them. Even though there was a temporary release specific to that unit, you still need to continue to notify the department of other units that come available. That is not a permanent release. So the release emails are not permanent release. So we're not saying that, oh, we don't need unit 102. It's saying we don't need unit 102 right now. Either we didn't need it because it was the wrong floor, we needed it on the first floor and that's on the second floor. It could be that we don't have a tenant that needs that specific bedroom size. There's a lot of reasons for that. But what is important is that you need to keep notifying the department when other units become available. So it's just saying, hey, thanks for letting us know about this unit, but we're going to skip this one and go on to the next one. When you are notifying us of available units, there's some important things you need to know. One is that your 811 units are not fixed, they are floating. So if you have tenants that are in specific units now, that does not mean you're required to replace that specific unit number with another 811 tenant. as you have units become available on the entire property, you need to be notifying the 811 Administration Division of the availability of those units. So for example, if you have 5 units that you have that were 811 tenants, and now you have one move out in another location, you should be notifying them of another location. So it's not specific to specific unit numbers, it floats, just like the housing tax credit programs, additional designations float throughout the property. Again, the unit cannot be occupying, you should not be designating for the housing tax credit program an 811 tenant at the 30% AMI. You can designate them at 60 or 50, but you cannot designate them at 30%. The reason for that is that we're trying to make sure that we have a lot of availability of those lower designations. And so the program has it built in where you cannot actually designate a 30% tax credit and also have it be an 811 occupied tenant. So when you're thinking of how many units to notify of the department, you need to think of how many units you still need to fill. So if you're required to have 10 and you only have 5, you have 5 more to go. Also, another thing to think about is that when you are notifying the department, you need to let them remind the 811 admin staff that, hey, my unit mix is I'm supposed to have a certain number of 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. I have all my 1 bedrooms, but I need 2 bedrooms. So this is a 2 bedroom that has come available. You should still let them know of 1 bedrooms that come available. They may choose to do a unit mix update, but when notifying the 811 admin team, you do need to make sure you're having the conversation with them of, hey, I'm trying to meet my obligation under the RAC or the current unit mix. And because of that, I need you to know that I have all the 1 bedrooms I need. I don't need any more 1 bedrooms, but if you want me to have another 1 bedroom, I'm going to need a unit mix update. Keep in mind that units do need to be dispersed throughout the entire property. So you can't put them, again, you cannot put them all in the same unit or in the same building, and you can't put them all in the same area of the property. You do need to disperse them throughout the community. So that's release emails. Do we have any other questions about the documentation before we move on to part 2? Does not look like we have any questions.
Justin,
Yes, ma'am.
for the captioning, if I believe you can make the font size bigger. I have just learned this.
Oh,
I don't know
okay.
if that's still an issue or
Let's see. Let's make that bigger.
you see at the very bottom where it says A, yep, there we go. That might help.
There we go.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you for letting me know. That's important. We want to make sure everyone is able to participate. So thank you very much. I'll make sure to do that in future presentations. All right. If we have no other questions, we're going to go ahead and continue on. And part 2, let's talk about how do you notify the department of the availability and the application outcomes. So the first part was talking about how you need to know how do you know how many 811 tenants you're supposed to have. And so you should be looking at those documents to get an understanding of how many are required, how many a bedroom size, keeping in mind certain things like you can't count them in a certain part of the community. So let's talk about how do you notify the 811 the department specifically. So after the owner executes the participation agreement, the participation agreement is basically the owner committing to participating in the 811 PRA program. And once that happens, you need to begin notifying the 811 Administration Division of units that become available. So if you're in lease up, you need to let them know. If you were a property that was already in place and you've been going for a while and now you have 811 tenants, regardless, as units become available, you need to be notifying them that you have units that are available. Now, if you have a participation agreement and you have not in the past been notifying 811, you need to start notifying them now. So regardless of if you've had communications in the past recently, you need to begin notifying them now. We're letting you know in this presentation. When you notify the department of available units, again, we want to emphasize how important that the 811 units are floating and not fixed. You cannot designate that unit for the tax credit program as 30% AMI. You can designate it as 40, 50, 60, whatever you want. How many units you still need is important. How many units based on bedroom size is important. You need to disperse it throughout the property. When you are notifying the 811 admin staff, they're going to have conversations with you by email, and it's important for you to understand what they are telling you you need. So for example, if they're telling you that they need a first floor instead of a third floor, that's something you need to point out when you are notifying them of an available unit. So for example, you say, hey, I have unit 301 that's come available, but in my last email, you said you needed a first floor. Do you still need only a first floor, or is the third floor okay? So it's about communicating what is it that you are offering and listening to what they are letting you know that they need. The 811 program does have rights to have accessible units offered to them first. So if you do have those units that are coming available, you definitely want to indicate to the 811 admin team that this unit is an accessible unit. There are some of our participants in the 811 program that do require some of that modified units. And so if you're letting us know, that does help us out tremendously. So if you received a pause letter or a temporary release email, you still need to notify the department. Those were just, a pause letter is just saying we paused based on funding and need a certain number of units. And the temporary release email was just saying we don't need that specific unit at this time. But that doesn't mean that you're not supposed to continuously be notifying of availability. So make sure you're still letting the 811 admin team know as units are becoming available so that they get to choose whether or not they need that unit. So how do you notify us? So someone on site or someone with the compliance division or someone representing the owner or the owner themselves will be sending emails to 811info@tdhca.texas.gov. So there's no official form. It's simply you sending an email to that email address, and they will respond to you letting you know, oh yes, we need this unit, or no, we don't at this time. So the property is required to maintain records on units that have been referred and not referred for future review. So what does that mean? That means specifically that we are beginning to ask, as part of the compliance monitoring review process, for your move out and vacancy reports. We will be comparing that to the units that you offered to the 811 admin team. And if you have not offered them a unit, you need to have a reason why you did not offer them that unit. And you need to have a log basically letting us know, as these units becoming available, did I offer it to 811 and what was the outcome of that? You need to have a history of that, because if you are not able to document it and it appears that you were not notifying the department of the availability of units, you could potentially have a finding of non-compliance. It is important to note that whoever is the contact for the department, so if the department needs to reach out to you, they need a contact person who is going to be a dependable person that they can reach out to. So they need to be reliable and they need to be consistent. So if you pick someone, make sure it's someone who stays there. If that person leaves, the owner is still responsible for maintaining this communication. So when deciding who to pick, make sure it's someone who is going to be sticking around. So if that contact no longer works there, we are going to, if you do not provide us a contact information or contact person, the department is just going to reach out to the person who is the management contact in CMTS. So be prepared for that. It looks like we have a couple of questions. Let's see. The handout is super small. Can you make it larger? If you need a larger copy of that, please feel free to email me and I can send you a larger copy of that. Does the department want to receive updates if there is nothing available, no vacancy, as in on a regular basis? No, they don't want to know if you do not have if they don't need to know unless they're expressly telling you that they need to know. They are looking for being notified specifically of units that become available. So that's a good question. All right, let's keep on trucking. After you notify the department of an available unit, the 811 administration staff will refer to you one or more applicants. It is most common that they're going to be referring you a batch of applicants. It's your job to screen those applicants for two things, two major things. One is suitability of occupancy. What does that mean? That's a HUD term for saying you need to look at your tenant selection criteria and making sure that they qualify under your criteria. Now, keep in mind that during monitoring reviews, 811 administration team is reviewing written policies and procedures. And so when they're doing so, they're looking at your tenant selection criteria to make sure you don't have anything that is not permitted under the program. So suitability of occupancy is, do they qualify to participate in your property? And are they going to meet the obligations of the lease contract? The second is, do they qualify for the program? Are they eligible? Do they meet the eligibility for student? Do they meet the income requirement? There's an income restriction at move-in. Are they below that limit? After you screen them for occupancy and eligibility, you're going to have some outcomes. So if you deny an applicant, they didn't meet the eligibility of the program, or they didn't meet your tenant selection criteria, you need to notify the 811 administration staff by sending it to that 811 info email that the family was denied. And when you notify them, you need to attach to that email a copy of the denial letter. They're going to look at that denial letter, and they're going to determine that the denial letter met the requirements of the program, and that they were denied for a reason allowed and permitted under the program. So for example, if you say to them that they didn't income qualify and you use the wrong income limit, they're going to say, wait a minute, that's wrong. You need to try again. So there is more of a conversation back and forth, more so than the other multifamily programs that we monitor, on when you are denying applications. If you determine that all of the applicants that have been referred to you did not end up in a lease, either they were unable to be reached, you called the numbers and sent the emails that we provided you, or you denied all of the applications, you need to notify the department that you need more referrals. The goal is that you're working through the process in a timely and efficient manner, and that when you get through that batch that we sent, that you reach back out and say, hey, I've sent you all my denied letters, my denied notices. Can I have please more units so that I can fill this unit? If you are unable to reach an 811 referral that we have sent you within a reasonable amount of time. So for example, we give you a phone number that they provided us on the wait list. You've called that 3 times over the course of a week. If you are unable to reach them, you need to reach back out to the 811 administration staff, and they will either look into finding you more up-to-date contact information, or they will proceed and provide you additional referrals for you to work with. Once you lease a unit, you also need to know the 811 admin staff, what was the outcome of that? Did you actually lease a unit to them? If so, what is that unit number? And provide a copy of the executed lease contract. Now, I do want to remind everyone that you cannot use any other lease contract other than the HUD model lease. So for the program, you cannot have a dual TAA, Texas Apartment Association lease. You cannot have your own personal owner or management generated lease. You can only have the HUD model lease that is required. And you can't use any of the addendums that is not specifically approved for the program. They're just looking for that lease contract. They basically want to see that the tenant and the owner has executed the contract. That's their way of determining that process has been completed. If you are confused during the process or you need help, please reach out to the 811 administrative staff. They are happy to help you and talk to you about what your specific scenario is, what do they need, what do you need to submit. So please make sure and do so. And they're very nice. They're all very nice people, so you should feel comfortable reaching out to them. So it looks like we have some questions. If it's a mixed income property and a market rate unit becomes available, do we need to notify you? Yes. So the units are not, the 811 PRA program is not tied to market versus tax credit. It's tied to the units at the property. We typically encourage you to fill an 811 tenant in a housing tax credit unit because you are only going to be paid rent based on up to the 60% AMI for the tax credit program. So putting them in a market unit, you're not going to get more money. So we encourage you to put them in a tax credit unit, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be notifying them of the availability of market units. Because if you're failing to meet your obligation because you've not been notifying us and you filled all your tax credit unit, it's not an excuse that you were like, well, it was just a market and I didn't have anything else. So you do need to notify us of the availability of market units. How quickly do you refer residents to us? Are we supposed to wait to hear back from you before leasing to someone who walks in the door? Yes, that is correct. When you are notifying the 811 admin team that you have available units, they're usually pretty quick to respond. What is helpful in responding is, like we've been talking about in the training today, is you need to be providing them information on that unit, and you need to be aware of what they have notified you recently about what their needs are. So in your communications, you do need to just say more than unit 101 is available. Well, what does that mean? Unit 101 is a first floor unit. It has an accessible, handicap accessible modifications to the unit. All of that information facilitates the process, but they do have first dibs on those units. So you do need to be having an active conversation with them so that you can move through that process as soon as possible. If after going through this process, you've gone through the entire batch and 811 says, okay, we do not have any more people who would have a need for a unit at your property, they can release that unit and they would notify you in one of those release emails saying, hey, you know what, I don't need 102. Go ahead and you're able to lease it to a different, to someone who's walking in through the door. Can you please clarify on the individual needing to meet rental criteria? Yeah, so just like other multifamily programs, you have a tenant selection criteria. You need to follow that tenant selection criteria. You need to treat everyone the same. The 811, the department is monitoring your tenant selection criteria during monitoring reviews. And so we're looking to make sure that you are not having any criteria that is not permitted and making sure you do add information into that criteria that helps notify 811 applicants or tenants their rights under the program. So when you are screening them for suitability, you are making sure that they do qualify. So for example, you do need to make sure that you screen them for your credit and criminal. Now for the 811 program, you should be taking into consideration that you want to make sure that your policies are not discriminatory towards the 811's population, which is a protected class. They are disabled. So you want to make sure that when you are having general criteria for tenancy, that you are not including anything that would potentially impact the disabled population specifically. Usually what will happen is when we're reviewing your tenant selection criteria, you may be provided guidance about that saying, hey, you know, on the face, this does not appear to impact 811 tenants, but based on experience, we know that this is, we recommend that you make this change. But there are some additional criteria that you need to screen them for, such as you do need to screen them for, are they on the state lifetime sex offender registry? If they are, then they're not eligible to participate in the program. So that's some of the examples, and we'll talk about that in a future training. Let's see, how much time must lapse if there are no referrals received after attempts have been exhausted? So I believe that they're having an active conversation with you, and so it's based on how much information you're providing them. So I understand you want to fill those units as fast as possible. oops, I got dark. You want to be notifying them as soon as possible. And once a unit is available, it's ready for occupancy, that begins the clock for them. And so you can notify them in advance of a unit that's going to be coming available, but they're not going to be able to send information over and get going until it's ready for occupancy. And so you want to make sure that when you're notifying the 811 admin staff, that you're having active conversation with them. Because if you're not providing them information, you're not responding quickly, that's going to slow you down. So they're pretty quick on responding. We have dedicated staff that are actually monitoring for this specifically. So they're pretty quick about that. So when we call the number to review the referral, do screen them? Like, do we do our regular prospects and have to meet our income guidelines like 2.5 times the rent? That's a great question. So when we're reviewing your tenant selection criteria, one of the things is that 2.5 times rent does not apply to them. The reason for that is that the program itself is determining how much rent they can afford. So there is some criteria that does not apply to tenants, 811 tenants, that would normally apply. So I would look at your tenant selection criteria, and if you have any questions about it specifically, you can reach out to the 811 admin staff. You can email them at 811info@tdhca.texas.gov, and you can ask them if you have some concerns about your criteria. But if you've had a review with us recently, we've already provided you feedback on that. But if you have concerns about it because we haven't been out, just be aware that we are coming out on an annual basis. So we will see you before August if we have not already seen you beginning in September. Let's see. Clarity in reference to senior communities. Okay, well, so the property can be a senior community. However, for the 811 program, the qualifying household member needs to be head, co-head, or spouse. They need to be between the ages of 18 and 62. So they cannot be over 60, they can't be 62 or older. And so for that, if you have a senior development and all of your tenants are 62 or older, that would be problematic for the program. So you, when the owner executed the participation agreement, the owner committed to not accepting funding that would prevent the housing of 811 tenants. And so if you have elected a senior requirement that prevents tenants, you may have a problem because you're kind of in a conundrum. You have two requirements, and if you're not able to meet the 811 requirement, you have an issue. Some senior communities are where you have 80% of them have at least one person who is 55 years of age or older, with the remaining 20% not in that. That is oftentimes what we see when layered with the 811 program. Those are great questions. If there are none more, or if you have one, go ahead and type it in and we'll continue on. Special claims on vacant units. So this is something I deal not at all with. So I'm going to turn this over to Caitlin so that she can answer those questions, and I am going to get out of her way so that she can take over. Go ahead, Caitlin. And
Awesome.
Just let me know when you want me to switch to the next slide.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Justin. Okay, so go ahead and take me to the next slide. So special claims on vacant units. This is going to be specifically for new construction properties during their initial lease-up period. So special claims are available for each assisted unit that is not leased as of the effective date of the rental assistance contract, or the RAC. Payment is not to exceed 80% of the contract rent for up to 60 days of vacancies. Owners must make attempts to fill the vacancy and not reject any eligible applicant except for good cause. Again, this is specifically during the lease-up period for new construction properties. On to the next slide. This example is going to be for not for new construction properties, but if you're post lease up, or if it's just like you had a move out and a move in, and you're trying to make a special claim. So we can only pay 60 days of vacancy The 60-day clock starts when the unit is actually available for occupancy or when it's considered make ready, not when the unit becomes vacant. The vacancy payments are only for units we are actively trying to fill with 811 tenants. Vacancy claims are processed through Blueprint. So you'll need to confirm with the waitlist lead, more than likely that's going to be me at the time. So confirm that the unit is being released. Usually I'll say, we release this unit to you at this time to fill with your typical non-811 applicants. So you'll confirm that the unit is being released. After that, you will have to reach out to Ann Hittner, and this is her contact information here. You'll send an email to Ann requesting a vacancy claim checklist. She should respond to you fairly quickly and will instruct you on what to do next. Next slide, please. And so special claims on vacant units after lease up. Payments are not to exceed 80% of the contract rent for up to 60 days of vacancy. You'll want to certify that the vacancy was not caused by owner violating the lease, the RAC, or any applicable law. The owner must notify TDHCA of the vacancy. They have to make attempts to fill the vacancy, and they cannot reject any eligible applicant except for good cause. Any questions on special claims or vacancies? And I do not have access to the questions, so someone might have to read them to me if there are.
So the answer is no, there are no questions about this.
Awesome.
So the presentation was so spot on. They were like, I have no questions. I know exactly what I need to do. No, if you do have questions, please feel free to reach out. We can help you through that process. So this is kind of an extra benefit of participating in the Ed 11 program. The first one is that you get a portion of the tenant's rent that's going to be paid by HUD. The other is that if you have a vacancy and you're actively working through this process, you could potentially get a payment for holding that unit. So it's just one of the perks of participating in 811. All right, we're going to move on. If you have questions about this, you can enter them into the question box and we can circle back those around if we see them. Thanks, Caitlin.
Did you want me to do part 4?
Yeah, if you feel up for it, go. Let's do it.
Absolutely. So this is my whole realm. So how does the waitlist process work? So the department, we manage the waitlist for the 811 program. Some MSAs have waitlist where some MSAs have pre-existing waitlists, and then some we are actually working towards a real-time referral system. So some of these properties we have, 100 or so people that have been on the wait list. And then for some of our other properties, we've either phased out those old wait lists, and now we are adopting what we're referring to as a real-time occupancy filling system. And so that's, you're offering us a unit, and once we're notified of a unit, then we are reaching out to our referral networks to request a fresh application. Referrals for our program come from different HHSC or Health and Human Services Commission agencies. So these are going to be people that are exiting out of nursing facilities. Maybe they have a physical disability. People with IDD exiting from intermediate care facilities or ICFs. They might have a developmental disability. People with serious mental illness that are coming from a local mental health authority. And then youth and young adults exiting out of foster care, and they're being referred through the Department of Family Protective Services. So if an 811 tenant wishes to transfer to another property, not the same property, they must reapply to the program with the referral agency. If there's a wait list, they'll be placed on the wait list in the order in which it was received. We get this question a lot. A lot of our tenants reach out to us and they might want to move, or they might even talk with the property manager and ask, hey, how can I move? There is no transfer under the Section 811 program, so they would have to reapply because the Section 811 program is a project-based rental assistance program. Our rental assistance stays with the units at the property.
And to be clear, that's different than transfers within the property. And there can be reasons that the program requires you to transfer a tenant. It could be that they're in the wrong bedroom size because someone has moved out. that is not something that requires them to reapply, but you should be notifying 811 admin of what's going on so that they know what unit you have your tenants in.
And I'll even piggyback on that. We do have some folks that will reach out to us to ask us if they can upgrade to a larger sized unit. And so we will grant that typically, if the funding is available, if there's room on the rental assistance contract for us to upgrade them to a different bedroom size. The best example would be if you have like a single person who had a baby and they need to they want to upgrade to a 2-bedroom unit. That is something we can typically grant. You'll just have to reach out to us to confirm that we can do that transfer. We'll maybe have to do a rack amendment, which we talked about earlier in the training. So that is something that we can do, and we do try to accommodate that for our folks on the program. So transfers within the property is very easy, but if anyone wants to leave the property, there are extra steps that they'll have to take to do that. So then the department will refer those applicants to you. You'll get an email from me. It will usually detail 1 or 2 applicants for the unit that you're offering. If someone comes into your office and you believe they may be eligible to participate but are not already referred to the program, you can refer them to us, have them reach out to that 811 info email. We can give them instructions on who they would need to which agency they would need to reach out to. It is typically dependent on what county they are in and then what target population they fall under, which is those first 4 bullet points under the HHSC agencies.
Looks like we have a, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, we have a question?
We have 2 questions. How do I
Okay.
know what units to hold for 811?
Do you want to answer that one, Justin?
Well, you should be notifying the 811 admin staff of the availability of any unit that has been vacated, whether they were previously occupied by 811 tenants or not. You need to be notifying them. So when you're going to send them an email and you're going to let them know, and then they're going to respond letting you know if they need that unit or not. If they don't need the unit, they're going to say, hey, we're releasing this unit, you're good to go, let us know of the next unit that comes available. If you have batches of it, send it at the same time. Say, hey, I have these units that are coming available. I know that they're going to be moving out. Are you going to be needing these units? The process is you need to have communication with the 811 staff, and they're going to be letting you know which units they're going to need. So it's not a specific unit. It's not a specific area of the property. It's as units are becoming available, any unit that's coming available on your property, you need to basically let them know, and they get to decide whether or not that's a unit that they need for the program. If you've met your number, you have 10 units you're required and you're at 10, I would reach out to 811 just to confirm and make sure that they're okay with that. They may choose to increase the number of units or they may not, but you need to be reaching out just to have communication with them to let them know. The next question is, so once we get transfer approved, what is the process of that once it gets approved? Do we just move them into that unit? Who do we reach out to complete the process?
Great question. I'll take that one. So yes, if you've confirmed that someone is going to be transferring, we'll need to be notified of their new unit number so that we can capture that whenever the voucher comes in. The only thing that you'll have to do on your end essentially is just change that unit number in your software. Depending on the status of how many tenants we currently have, we might actually replace the unit that they transferred out of with another 811 tenant or another 811 applicant. So for our end, we just need to confirm that new unit number, and then we'll capture that whenever they are vouchered for. And then on your end, you'll just change that information in your software.
The next question is something I think that is for me. So it sounds like a property that participates in 811 cannot have their own waiting list, right? That's not what we're saying. You may have the 811 program layered with another program that may require wait lists. And so what needs to be happening is if you're having a conflict between those 2 programs, you need to reach out to the department on that specific need to let us know what is happening. And then if it's 2 programs that we are working on, we can provide you guidance. Typically, we've not heard a lot of issues with this specifically. So if you are having an issue, please let us know. And that's something then that we can help you resolve. If it's with another program, then we're not going to be able to help you with that because we don't monitor that program. But the department is doing the wait list for the 811 program, and you're maintaining your own wait list for the other programs. And so this is more about letting us know what's going on. And if you are telling us that you have a unit available and you have a program need for to comply with another program, you need to let the 811 staff know that that is what is going on, and then they can make a judgment call as to whether or not they're going to let you have this unit for the other program or if it's one that they need. Great question.
Yes, that is.
All right, are you ready for the next slide?
Well, I was going to say, I have one more bullet point, and it kind of goes into what you were just saying. So if you do move someone into an 811 unit and they were not referred directly by the department, then that unit is not eligible for subsidy payment. So all referrals have to come from us. You know, we have had people in the past that have walked in and say, oh, I applied for the Section 811 program. Do you have a unit available? And we've had people house those people before, and unfortunately they have to move out. So please make sure you are not moving anyone or having anyone apply for an 811 unit if their name did not come directly from us.
Yeah, that's important, and it's sad to hear when it happens. So please make sure that it's coming from us.
Right.
All right. So the next section is part 5, but it looks like we have another question. Once we fill all of our maximum 811 units, we don't need to notify you all, correct? No, that's not correct. So the rack number is not the full number of units that you may need to be at your property. So the participation agreement will typically state the maximum number of tenants that we have gotten, that the owner has committed to. The rack is kind of a number that may be different than that number, and that number is kind of a test to see how many units may be needed at your property. So even if you've reached your number, you need to reach out to the 811 staff to let them know. They may tell you in your email, hey, you've reached your number and we do not have a need to increase the number on the rack. We're going to go ahead and release the units. Once you fall below that number, reach back out to us. So they're going to provide you instructions on it. It's not going to be where, you know, you reach your number and every time a unit comes available, you have to notify the 811 staff. What's going to happen is once you reach your number, you're going to let them know, and the 811 staff is going to say to you, hey, you know what, you're good for right now. We don't need to amend your rack. We don't need to increase the number of units. You're good to go. Once one of your 811 tenants have moved out, then you need to let us know, and we'll begin the conversations of filling those units again. That was a great question. All right, so basically we've gone through the process, what documents you need to review to know how many tenants. We've gone through the process of how do you notify the 811 staff, and then we've also notified how do you get vacancy payments, and then how does the wait list work? How are we working through that wait list, and how are we getting you tenants? The next is going to be, how does compliance, so that's my section, how do we determine that you are satisfying the requirements of this specifically? So what I am doing is I am reviewing the requirements specific to the property. I am looking at the same documents that you are as well. I am taking into consideration the Texas Administrative Code and other program rules and regulations that are required for the program. And I'm looking to make sure that you are complying with those. But specifically for the wait list and referral of tenants, I am actually reaching out to the 811 admin staff and asking them for feedback. I asked them for feedback on several things, but specifically to what we're training today, I am asking them, has someone representing the owner for this property been reaching out consistently to notify you of vacancies and the outcomes of applications? If they tell me no, we have documentation to show when you've been reaching out, we will potentially cite a finding of non-compliance. Now, we do offer technical assistance, and we have been since September, reminding owners that they do need to be notifying us and filling it out. We have begun requesting copies of your vacancy reports and your move-out reports. You do, like we said earlier, you do need to be tracking when units are becoming available. Did you refer them to 811? What was the outcome of that referral? Did they release the unit? Did you lease the unit? You need to be tracking that because you have to document that you are complying with this. And so I'm reaching out to the 811 staff, and then I'm looking at the documentation you've submitted to me. So I am looking at, most of our multifamily programs, we're currently looking at the most current certification, sometimes looking back. For the 811, I have to look at a period of review. So typically that period of review is from the last time we came out to right before the due date of your documentation. And during that review, I'm looking for certifications, but specifically for today, I'm looking for today's training is I'm going to be looking at the unit status reports that you submitted during that period. I'm looking at the vacancy reports and move out reports that you submit for the review. And if I see units that have become available and 811 confirms that you didn't notify them of that, that could potentially be a finding of non-compliance. We also I'm looking at records kept for your property. So in the future, we're going to be making sure that if you do not, if you are submitting those vacancy and move out reports, you need to have a log that's showing, hey, we did offer these and they got released, or we leased a unit, or why they were released. That is important so that you can demonstrate compliance with this. There is some areas and some properties that there is a huge need. And that could be based on a lot of reasons. One of them could be the location of your property. If you're on a bus line where someone who has wheelchair access can easily access your property, you might be a popular property to have. So it may be that you're constantly getting very close, or you're always at the number required in the rack. Or you could be a property, and it could be not just for location, it could be other reasons as well, but there could be reasons why your property, maybe there's not a need for your area as much as was anticipated. If that's the case, you still need to be making sure that you have a record of that. If you're not meeting your requirement, we're going to begin asking for a plan of action on how you plan on resolving that. So in the past, we have been more relaxed on allowing the owners to tell us what is happening, and kind of just saying, by you notifying us, that's kind of been okay. We are now saying that we're reestablishing expectations going forward, beginning with this training and future reviews, that you need to take a more active role in notifying us and getting to your numbers. So in the past, it was very common for you not to reach your number, but now we're looking for you to actually reach those numbers. And if you can't reach those numbers, there needs to be a reason documented for that. Looks like we have another question. If we are updating CMTS monthly, we will still be required to provide additional reports. If not, do you have an example of the log you were referring to? Thanks. That's a great question. So CMTS is the compliance monitoring and tracking system. And I've referenced it before. It's the way that we communicate to you, and it's the way that you submit reports to our agency for our programs. And you are required on a quarterly basis for all of our programs to submit a quarterly vacancy report. The 811 program, I am looking at them, but the reason why I'm asking for your vacancy and move out reports is that because you're only required to submit on a quarterly basis, I don't know what is happening in between those quarters. So you could have had someone move in, move out in that time frame, but I wouldn't know it because it's only as of a snapshot of each quarter. So it's important that we get those reports to review. And a log does not need to be something complicated. It just simply needs to be, this is the unit that became available. This is when it became available. This is when I notified 811. This was the outcome of that notification. It could be that they released the unit. We saved a copy of that email with the log showing that they released the unit. And then you can have a comment like, you know, they released it because it was on a 3rd floor and they said that they needed 1st floor. So it doesn't need to be anything fancy. since this is more of a new requirement that we're bringing to you, as we are going through that, we'll be providing you feedback if we think you need to strengthen your records on this. But in general, you need to be at a minimum tracking that when units became available, what was the outcome of that? Did you refer it, and what happened? If you didn't refer it, you need to have a really good reason why you didn't refer it. You know, it could be something to the effect of you need another 30% AMI for a tax credit. You notified the 811 staff it came available, but you needed a 30% AMI for tax credit. And so you're asking them to say, hey, could we just have this for tax credit? And they're most likely going to say, yes, that's totally fine. We know you have obligations under the other program. So hopefully that answered your question. Do we have any other questions? Everyone's like, wow, it's dry stuff. All right. So I want to thank everyone for participating. I'm going to give a few moments to see if any more questions filter in. Before I let you go, I do have some announcements, but let's wait to see if we have any questions. Sometimes it takes a little while to type in. Well, thank you, Caitlin, for helping me today. I appreciate that. You're a wealth of knowledge, so I think people should do themselves a favor, and if they, you know, we're talking about what are the expectations today for notifying you, and so if you have concerns or comments or questions, you can reach out to Caitlin to discuss that. You know, she's an excellent resource. Like I said, she's very friendly. I work with her on a day-to-day basis. She's always been very nice. She doesn't have to be. I mean, sometimes I talk to her early in the morning and either she's always on point with her coffee or she's just genuinely a friendly person, but definitely, oh, we got some questions. All right. If we are new to the program and we just received a release letter, would we now be required to notify the department and keep record of new units that are at 30%? So that's kind of a two-part question. The answer is yes. If you have executed a participation agreement, whether we have recently contacted you or not, you are required to notify the 811 admin team at that 811info@tdhca.texas.gov email address. They are going to basically let you know what is the expectation of the number of units. They may, if you're new to the program, they may begin to send you units before, well, they will begin to send you units before they execute a rental assistance contract. So you do need to be notifying them as units are becoming available. And if you're unclear on when or what, you can definitely email them and reach out to them and they can help you specifically for that. And do you need to keep a record? Yes. If you didn't keep a record up to this point, it's not the end of the world. But going forward, you're going to need to make sure you have that record so that I'm able to determine whether or not you complied. I think that there has been a lot of misunderstanding on how this process is supposed to work, which is why we're offering the training today. And as Amy Hammond, the manager of compliance monitoring, has said in the past, we're looking for grace on all sides. So we often use that term in HOTMA where we're saying, hey, you know what, we're going to get through this together. That is the same with this documenting availability of units on your part. I'm going to be giving a lot of grace, but you got to give me a lot of grace as well. If there's an egregious non-compliance where you clearly just didn't bother talking to us, you know, your records are going to need to be really, really strong as to why you did not notify us. And I did not know is not a good excuse. So yes, definitely keep records and let us know. Sorry I was late, but did we review the process for giving current tenant a notice for non-payment due to not completing recertifications? No. This training is specifically for talking about waitlist and vacancies. In the future, we are going to be offering additional trainings, so we'll talk about that in the future. Caitlin is amazing, so are you. Well, that is very nice of you to say. We definitely are working hard to make sure everyone is aware of what are the requirements and helping you through that process. Don't be shy. Some people say that they're scared to talk to us, and that just completely bewilders us. I don't know if it's our haunting good looks or what, but don't feel scared to reach out to us. We're happy to talk to you. In fact, you know, we will be happy to talk at length about the 811 program. We're both very passionate. Everyone who participates in 811, we believe in this program. We know that there are some difficulties in the program. We're here to help you with that. The referral agencies and counselors with Health and Human Services are good resources. We're working towards trying to make that information more readily available to you by moving to a more real-time referral system, those counselors and referral agents to be more actively participating in that process. So we're actively trying to make things easier for you. So if you have feedback and you have information or you have questions or difficulties, let us know. Maybe we have a solution for you. Will you be sending 18-year-olds plus to senior communities where age 62 is criteria? We might. So your obligation is to notify us. And if you tell us that you don't allow 18-year-olds, 811 is going to have a candid conversation with you because you may have accepted funding from a source that has prevented you from participating in the program. I am not part of that process, but from what I understand, it's not great. So if you have that situation, I recommend that you reach out proactively to them now to discuss what are some options, if any, at this point. Great question. Thank you for this training. Great info. Caitlin is awesome. I agree. Caitlin is awesome. Thank you so much for this training. You're welcome. When will there be training on how to process for eligibility? We are currently working on other trainings, so that one will be in the near future. We plan on, right now, we're anticipating offering 6 trainings. We're not doing giant trainings, we're doing small trainings. The reason for that is because we have been getting feedback that it's harder for on-site staff to participate in an all-day training versus smaller trainings. The trainings are going to be live like this one and then recorded and posted to the website. So if you're not able to attend today or in the future, we do send out information through the listserv and post to our TDHCA calendar. You're welcome to attend those. If you can't, they're available for you or anyone in the future. If you get new staff and you want them to participate, they're going to be available with the handouts. When will there be, so when will we review notice to vacate in another training, correct? Yes, we will definitely talk about that. That is a very popular question that we get. I understand that we are required to also send notifications to TDHCA. That is correct. We'll just touch on it real quick since it's a good question. We won't talk about it in depth though. If you have further questions, go ahead and send it to us outside the training. We want to make sure we minimize how much this training takes up because we want to keep it rather specific. But for notices, if you are notifying someone that they have been denied an application, you need to notify the 811 staff. 3 days prior to sending a notice of termination of assistance, termination of tenancy, notice of non-renewal, notices to vacate, you do need to notify the 811 staff in advance of notifying the tenant. So the reason for that is that we are trying to mitigate any issues that may be a problem. It's to benefit you as much as them. If your notice is incorrect and does not have the right information on it to comply with the program, we're going to notify you so that you notify them so that you are aware before you notify the tenant. If you are non-renewing or terminating assistance for a reason that is not permitted under the program, they're going to say, wait a minute, you can't do that. If you are notifying them of a reason of terminating them for a reason that is allowed under the program, we may try to discuss with you options of let's try to get the tenant additional resources to try to mitigate that issue. For example, most common one that we hear is, I cannot get the documentation for the annual recertification process. So oftentimes what we'll do is we'll find out who is the counselor or referral agent and get you that information to help you out. Additionally, we may actually reach out to the tenant to talk to them as well. It just depends on the circumstances. So that process is about helping the tenant as much as it is about helping you. I heard you answered that 18-year-old in a 62 and older property. I thought you said 18 to 62 only for 811, not 62 plus. That's correct, yeah. So what I was saying in that is that the program requires that they be 18 to 62 and the qualifying household member. And so there is potential problems with leasing it at a 62 only or 62 plus community, And so if that is what's happening, you definitely need to reach out to 811 admin to talk to them about that. All right, so I'm going to give you some time for any more questions. I just want to make sure that if you have any questions about waitlist, vacancies, vacancy payments, how is compliance monitoring this, more about documenting what you've told us, any of the communications, now is definitely the time. Any great question you have, we're gonna have in this recording session, and that you can have your future staff members check out. So ask good questions. Well, we have another one. What happens if they turn 62 while on the program? That's a great question. So if they have to be between 18 and 62 when they are moving into the program, once they are in the program, they can turn 62. They don't have to leave the program. So just like the income limits only apply at move-in, you don't have to apply the age requirement after they have moved in. And that does happen. We do have some tenants that we're trying to get you to move them in quickly because they're about to turn 62. Obviously, we're not going to ask you to do anything that is not okay, right? We're not going to be like, bend all your rules and policies to make this happen, but we're going to say like, hey, you know, let's put the gas on this one. Should we be following the 4350 HUD handbook to reference guidelines for notices and tenant selection plan required wording? Yes. So the 4350 is used by all of the multifamily programs at the department. Specifically, all the other programs use Chapter 3 for occupancy, who counts as a family and household member. Chapter 5 is calculating income. The 811 PRA program uses the entire manual. So any of those requirements. The only thing I want to be a caveat on is that a couple of things to note. The definition of disability is not defined in the HUD handbook for this program. It was defined by the agency. The program is designed for each state to decide the target population. So if we are referring you someone, they have been determined to be disabled and eligible in that regard. You're going to be given documentation for that when we send you that referral. You don't need to look at the HUD handbook for that. Another thing is that there is a sister program to the 811 PRA program called the 811 PRAC. The 811 PRA program is not specifically mentioned in the HUD handbook because it was not, when it was updated, the program was just getting started. They didn't put anything in it. So when you see 811 PRAC, that is not the same program. Some of the stuff for PRAC does apply to 811 PRA and some of it does not. If you are not certain and you're revising your tenant selection plan, your house rules, any of your written policies and procedures, Catherine Cole is going to be the best contact for that. She's the one who's reviewing those when we're doing reviews. So you can reach out to her at the 811info@tdhca.texas.gov email. Can you please give us email address to where we notify TDHCA of available units and how we get applicants? Great question. It's 811info@tdhca.texas.gov. Again, that's 811info@tdhca.texas, spelled out, .gov. Thank goodness that we got a new web domain. At least it saved us from having some extra dots and weird ones. Where do we get lease form from 811 program? So you can go to our website. Under the 811, they have forms. And the form is specifically, you're going to look for the HUD form 922. Oh my gosh, I completely blank it. I look at it every day. It's 92231.PRA or something to that effect. I know that's going to be exactly wrong because that's the one I just said on this training, but the HUD model lease is going to be specific. If you are, like I said, go to our website. If you are unable to find it, you can reach out to me at justin.merrill. So that's justin.merrill@tdhca.texas.gov, and I can send you the link and we can get you that correct lease. Any other questions? Good questions. For layered programs, are we still able to use the Texas Apartment Association app and supplemental rental application? Yes and no. So if you are using those forms and they are referencing a lease that you cannot use, then that's problematic. So you can use those forms, but I would recommend that you cross out the sections that do not apply that reference the TAA lease. If there is a problem where you take this before a court for some reason, they're going to see that there is a TAA lease and then you're not going to have one. So that's kind of confusing. I am not telling you what forms you can or cannot use for the program. I am simply saying that you cannot use any other lease or addendum that is not specifically approved for the program. So that means that you can use them, but if they reference a lease that is not the lease that you are required to use, you could potentially have an issue there. Some of the forms are not referring to specifically the other lease, so that is fine. But I do want to say that most of the addenda that you are using outside are not approved for the program. So typically you are allowed to have house rules, pet rules. Your pet rules can be in your house rules. And if you are having policies that are usually in an addenda, a great way of addressing that for the 811 program is to put them in the house rules. You can have a bed bug addendum, but I recommend since you're not able to use those under addendum, if they're referencing a lease that you're not allowed to use, I recommend you put them in your house rules. That is the best way of doing it. The house rules are an attachment to the HUD lease, and that's a great way of making sure that everything is covered then under the lease. All right. Let's give just a few more minutes to see if there are any other questions. I want to balance both the amount of time that we have and making sure that I don't take up everyone's time. I know you got other things to do. So I, again, want to thank you guys for coming today. I want to thank you for participating in the 811 program. You know, this program is a great way of reintroducing some of our most vulnerable communities in our society back into the general population. You know, that requires sometimes a little bit of effort, extra effort on our part, and we understand that, and we appreciate that you are making that accommodation. That is, you know, it goes a long way when we see that you are actively trying to make the process work. We do see that and we do acknowledge that. And if you're having difficulties, you need to let us know. We can help you with solutions. Do the house rules need to be approved prior to implementing them from TDHCA? No, we don't approve them in advance. If you want us to look at that, you can send them to 811info@tdhca.texas.gov. Catherine Cole is the person who reviews the written policies and procedures. She can give you guidance or feedback. I recommend if you have specific questions that you ask them versus just saying, hey, is this okay? That probably would save a lot of time on everyone's part. But we are reviewing those during the monitoring reviews. And as a reminder, we are doing that on an annual basis. So we will get to you if we haven't gotten to you yet this year. Great question. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and say some of our announcements, and after those announcements, if you still have some questions, we'll circle back around to them. I do want to remind everyone that HOTMA, the Housing and Opportunity Through Modernization Act of 2016, went into effect for the multifamily programs monitored by the department as of January 1st of 2024. So we have begun implementing HOTMA, but it is important to note that you are required to implement that for the other programs. However, for the 811 PRA program, HOTMA does not go into effect until your third-party software that you use to submit the HUD 59s, the 5059s, and the HUD 5059As to tracks is HOTMA compliant. So what is happening in the background is HUD is updating tracks, and then your software company is going to have to update their software to communicate both what are the changes and what are the basically the background, you know, coding to make sure that that is transmitted to them through tracks. So you cannot implement HOTMA for calculating certifications and calculations until your software is compliant. So what does that mean when I'm doing a monitoring review? I'm going to see 5.9s this year that are using old deductions, old calculations, including 401ks for the 811 program. You're not going to be including that for the other programs, but you will specifically for 811. We understand that that is kind of a pain, but the reality is that the HOTMA guidance is mostly geared towards Section 8 programs, which includes the 811 program. And so a lot of those requirements are, more of those requirements are geared towards our program. And so the way that they're getting implemented is that the other programs are borrowing how to calculate income and who is an occupant and all of that. And so because of that, it doesn't line up perfectly. And so the guidance does specifically state for programs, including the 811, that you're going to have to wait until your software is updated before you're able to implement. So you may end up having 2 sets of calculations, and that's going to be okay. What will happen is once your third-party software is updated, then you're going to take some steps. We're going to talk about that in future trainings. Don't worry, we got you back. But prior to that, you're going to be pre-HOTMA calculations until then. So that's announcement number 1. Announcement number 2 is that the next training for the 811 PRA program will be offered in March of this year and will cover specifically the tenant selection plan, including changes needed to be HOTMA compliant. Once that presentation is ready, the department will notify by listserv email and add it to the TDHCA calendar. Please keep an eye out for that announcement. Your tenant selection plan must be updated for HOTMA by March 31st of 2024. And so this training we're going to offer right before then. We're giving you time to look at the requirements, start making your changes, and then in March, we're going to be discussing you what those requirements are so that you can then make sure that you have everything. So we're going to go through a detail of what needs to be in there and what needs to be changed to comply with the requirement for HOTMA. The next announcement is that I just want to remind everyone that the department has begun in September of 2023 to monitor the 811 program differently from other multifamily programs. The reviews will be conducted annually and by management company, and they're conducted separately from other multifamily programs. So for the other programs, we come out every 3 years, and we're doing it by property. For the 811 program, we have changed the way we've done that. We hosted a roundtable, and we've provided trainings to talk about that. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. But what we are doing is we are doing it by management company. So make sure your management contact information is up to date on a property. I am reaching out proactively in those situations, but it's important that the reason why we're doing this is that when we were coming out every 3 years for properties, we are finding that not everything we were saying for 811 was transmitting to the other properties in your portfolio. And to make that easier to understand and kind of to reset everything, we are doing it by management company. And I know that seems like a lot of extra work, but most, well, in fact, everyone so far has communicated to me that have been through the new monitoring process that they've actually enjoyed it that way, because it is, instead of finding out at one property and then hearing something different at the next property, it's all the same information that's being communicated, just tailored to each specific property. You still get a letter for each property, but I'm asking for all the documentation at once. You're getting letters all at once. You have the same corrective action period all at once. And it's good to have that in lockstep. It's been helpful. Another thing to note is that unlike the other properties, we conduct certifications during a period of review. So since the last monitoring review to this monitoring review, we are looking at all of the certifications and documentation, including move-out paperwork. There are certain requirements in the HUD handbook that you need to maintain, or if you've moved out a tenant. The most common issue with that is just simply going to be that you forgot to notify them that there was an upcoming move-out inspection. If you have more questions about that, email me. I'm happy to point you in the right direction. But we are looking at former tenants during the review. So this is something different than the other programs. So I just want you to be aware that we have an obligation to monitor all certifications. And so any certification that has happened since the last one, we're going to be asking for. This includes certifications that are on your 5.9 and your 5.9As. So I need to see your gross rent changes, your transfers, adding household members, all of that. So it's important to let us know that you have that. So please keep your move out files so that you can provide that. You're required to keep them through the term of tenancy plus 3 years. So please make sure that you are saving that documentation. It doesn't look like we have any questions. So you guys have probably gotten enough from 811 today. You've probably heard enough from us. You're tired of looking at our faces. I understand completely. So if there are no other questions, I want to thank everyone for attending today's training. We hope that we were able to address the questions, concerns that you brought to our attention. After this meeting, if you think of any additional questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email Caitlin Devlin regarding your 811 administration questions and myself, Justin Merrill, with your compliance questions. If there are no other questions, we're going to conclude our time together. And thank you so much for participating, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.